On the icy morning of December 9th, 2024, the small town of Pelham, nestled in the dense Siberian wilderness of Russia, awoke to a quiet that felt heavier than usual. Snow blanketed the streets, muffling the sounds of life as children trudged to school number 3, a modest single-story building on the edge of the forest. Inside, the day began like any other, with laughter echoing down the hallways and teachers preparing lessons. By 9:30 a.m., the second grade class was gathered in the small gymnasium for their weekly physical education session. Their teacher, Irina Petrova, was a kind but firm woman who had spent her entire career teaching in Pelham. As the children warmed up with jumping jacks, she noticed a strange noise outside, a low growl, barely audible over the children's laughter. She brushed it off as the wind and continued the lesson. At the same time, near the edge of the forest, a large grizzly bear prowled closer to the school. Hunger had driven the animal to desperation. Deep snow had buried its usual food sources, and the bear, gaunt and irritable, had ventured further than usual into human territory. The scent of the children's packed lunches wafting from the school dumpsters had drawn it dangerously close. By 10 a.m., the bear had breached the schoolyard, its massive paws crunching through the snow. A janitor, Pavel Ivanov, was the first to see it. He was clearing snow from the rear entrance when he froze, his breath visible in the frigid air. The bear's dark eyes locked onto him. Pavel tried to back away slowly, but the bear charged, its powerful body closing the distance in seconds. The janitor's screams pierced the quiet, reaching the ears of the teachers inside. Irina stopped mid-sentence, her blood running cold. In the office, Principal Sergei Volkov grabbed the school's intercom and ordered an immediate lockdown. Teachers hurried to secure their classrooms, pushing desks against doors and herding children into corners. The bear, now enraged, tore through the rear entrance, splintering the doorframe with ease. It entered the hallway, its claws clicking against the linoleum. Pavel lay motionless outside, a trail of blood marking where the bear had dragged him before abandoning its kill for the promise of more prey. In the gymnasium, Irina barricaded the doors with whatever she could find, benches, mats, and a metal trolley. She ushered the children to a storage closet, whispering for them to stay silent. One boy, Sasha, clung to her skirt, his small frame trembling. Irina could hear the bear's guttural growls growing louder as it moved through the hallways. Meanwhile, in a third-grade classroom, 9-year-old Anya Dmitriev watched in terror as the bear's massive frame appeared outside their window. The teacher, Ekaterina Smirnova, quickly shut the blinds and pulled the children under their desks. The bear pawed at the glass, leaving deep scratches, but it didn't break through. After a tense moment, it moved on, its heavy breathing fading down the hallway. Principal Volkov, armed with an old hunting rifle from the janitor's closet, crept toward the noise. He had called the local authorities, but help was at least 40 minutes away. Alone, he approached the library, where the bear's growls had grown louder. As he rounded the corner, the bear charged, swiping at him with claws that tore through his coat and sent him sprawling. The rifle skidded across the floor. The noise startled the bear, and it retreated momentarily, giving Volkov enough time to crawl into a nearby classroom. He pressed himself against the door, blood soaking his shirt. The teacher inside, a young man named Mikhail, helped barricade the entrance as the bear's massive body slammed against it repeatedly. The children inside huddled together, their faces pale with fear. In the gymnasium, Irina's improvised barricade didn't hold for long. The bear burst through, scattering the furniture and roaring loudly. Irina grabbed a broom, brandishing it like a weapon as the children screamed. She struck the bear's snout, momentarily disorienting it. Using the brief opening, she led the children out a side door into the freezing cold. They ran toward a small utility shed, Irina covering the rear and scanning the horizon for further danger. Back inside, the bear continued its rampage, smashing lockers and overturning furniture. Police sirens finally echoed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. The bear, sensing danger, retreated toward the cafeteria, where it feasted on the leftover food in the garbage bins. When the police arrived, they coordinated with local wildlife officers to neutralize the threat. Armed with tranquilizer guns and rifles, they entered the school cautiously. By this time, most of the children and staff had been evacuated, but several remained trapped in classrooms. The bear was cornered in the cafeteria, its movements sluggish from exhaustion and overeating. A tranquilizer dart struck its shoulder, and after a few tense minutes, the massive animal collapsed. The aftermath was grim. Pavel Ivanov, the janitor, had succumbed to his injuries, and Principal Volkov was airlifted to a hospital in critical condition. Several children and teachers suffered minor injuries during the evacuation, but the majority were unharmed. The school itself was left in shambles, its hallways scarred by the bear's claws and destruction. In the days that followed, the town of Pelham mourned Pavel's death and celebrated the bravery of those who had acted to protect the children. Irina was hailed as a hero for her quick thinking, and Principal Volkov, though recovering slowly, received recognition for his courage in confronting the bear. Wildlife officials reminded the community of the importance of securing waste and avoiding actions that could attract predators. The grizzly bear was relocated to a remote part of the Siberian wilderness, far from human settlements. For the children of school number 3, the incident became a defining memory, a mixture of fear, bravery, and survival that would shape their understanding of the fragile balance between humans and the wild. In the fall of 1976, a group of friends set out for a weekend camping trip in Montana's Glacier National Park. The leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air was crisp with the promise of adventure. The group consisted of 5 people: Jake, a seasoned outdoorsman, his younger sister Emily, a recent college graduate, Mike, their childhood friend, and married couple Laura and Ben, both enthusiastic but inexperienced campers. Their destination was Bear Ridge, a remote campsite known for its breathtaking views and abundant wildlife. The group arrived in the early afternoon, their spirits high as they unloaded their gear and set up camp near the edge of a dense forest. They built a fire and spent the evening swapping stories, the crackling flames and distant sounds of nature creating a serene atmosphere. As night fell, Jake reminded everyone to secure their food in the metal storage boxes provided at the campsite. Bears were known to frequent the area, and he emphasized the importance of not leaving anything out that could attract them. The group followed his instructions, albeit somewhat casually. Emily teased Jake about being overly cautious, a remark that drew chuckles from the others. By midnight, the fire had died down, and the group retreated to their tents. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the wind. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that the tranquility was shattered. A low growl rumbled through the campsite, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. Jake was the first to wake, his instincts alerting him to danger. He unzipped his tent quietly, peering out into the darkness. In the faint moonlight, he saw a massive grizzly bear, its fur matted and its eyes gleaming. The bear was sniffing around the camp, its powerful body moving with deliberate intent. Jake whispered to the others, waking them one by one. Fear spread through the group as they realized the severity of the situation. The bear's movements became more aggressive, its growls louder as it pawed at one of the tents. Inside, Laura and Ben clutched each other, their breaths shallow and fast. Jake motioned for everyone to stay quiet and still, but Emily, overcome with panic, let out a startled gasp. The bear's head snapped toward her tent. It let out a deafening roar, charging forward and swiping at the fabric with its massive claws. The tent collapsed under the force, and Emily screamed as she scrambled to escape. Jake grabbed a flare gun from his pack and fired it into the air. The sudden burst of light startled the bear, causing it to retreat momentarily. He shouted for everyone to head for the trees, hoping to put distance between them and the animal. Emily and Mike ran, but Laura and Ben hesitated, struggling to navigate the collapsed tent. The bear charged again, its massive form barreling through the campsite. It knocked over the cooking equipment and tore into the storage boxes, scattering their contents. Jake fired another flare, aiming closer to the bear this time. The creature paused, growling deeply before resuming its rampage. Ben pushed Laura toward the tree line, urging her to climb. The bear turned its attention to him, swiping with its claws and knocking him to the ground. Laura screamed, but Jake and Mike intervened, shouting and waving their arms to draw the bear's focus. It worked. The bear charged at them instead, giving Ben enough time to crawl away. The group scrambled up the nearest trees, their hearts pounding as the bear circled below. It growled and clawed at the trunks, but the branches were out of its reach. For hours, they clung to their precarious perches, the cold seeping into their bodies as dawn approached. When the first light of morning broke, the bear finally retreated into the forest. The group climbed down cautiously, their limbs stiff and their nerves frayed. Ben's injuries were severe. Deep gashes marred his back and shoulder, and he was pale from blood loss. Jake fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches and sleeping bags, and the group began the arduous trek back to the trailhead. It took them most of the day to reach help. Park rangers met them halfway, alerted by another group of campers who had seen the flare. Ben was airlifted to a hospital, where he underwent surgery and weeks of recovery. The rest of the group sustained minor injuries and severe emotional scars, but survived. The bear attack made headlines, serving as a grim reminder of the dangers of underestimating wildlife. Jake, once confident in his skills, became an advocate for stricter safety measures in national parks. Emily, shaken by the close call, pursued a career in conservation, determined to educate others about respecting nature. For the group, the memory of that night remained vivid. The growls, the terror, and the fight to survive were etched into their minds. But they also remembered the bonds forged in those harrowing hours, a testament to their resilience and determination in the face of one of nature's most formidable predators. On the crisp autumn morning of October 3rd, 2017, a group of hikers set out to explore Whispering Pines Canyon, a rugged and secluded trail in Colorado. The group consisted of 6 people: Claire, a seasoned trekker in her late 30s, her younger brother Sam, an energetic 22-year-old college student, Emily and Mark, a married couple in their 40s, and friends Dana and Alex, both avid photographers eager to capture the canyon's stunning scenery. The trail, lined with towering pines and jagged cliffs, offered breathtaking views of the surrounding wilderness. By mid-morning, the group had hiked several miles, stopping occasionally to admire the scenery and snap photos. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. Unbeknownst to them, something else was watching. A mountain lion hidden among the rocks, its amber eyes locked on the group. Mountain lions are solitary and elusive predators, rarely seen by humans. But this one was different. Lean and hungry, it had been driven closer to human activity by dwindling prey in its territory. The hikers' chatter and the smell of food from their packs had drawn it in, and now it stalked them silently, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By noon, the group reached a clearing where the trail split into 2 paths. They decided to take a break, sitting on flat rocks and unpacking their lunches. As they laughed and shared stories, the mountain lion crept closer, its movements masked by the wind and the hikers' distraction. Sam wandered a few yards away from the group to take a photo of a striking rock formation. He crouched to frame the shot, oblivious to the predator now mere feet behind him. Claire glanced up just in time to see the mountain lion leap, its muscular body propelling it forward with terrifying speed. "Sam, behind you!" Claire screamed, scrambling to her feet. Sam turned, his eyes widening in horror as the mountain lion tackled him to the ground. Its claws tore into his jacket, and its powerful jaws snapped inches from his face. He struggled, kicking and shouting as the rest of the group rushed to help. Mark grabbed a branch and swung it at the animal, striking its side. The mountain lion released Sam momentarily, snarling as it turned to face the group. Dana and Alex shouted and waved their arms, trying to appear larger and more threatening. The predator hesitated, its ears flattening as it calculated its next move. Sam scrambled back toward the group, his arm bleeding from a deep gash. Claire grabbed him, pulling him behind her as Mark continued to swing the branch. Emily fumbled for her whistle, blowing it as loudly as she could in an attempt to scare the animal away. The shrill sound echoed through the canyon, momentarily unsettling the predator. The mountain lion lunged again, this time toward Mark. He sidestepped, the branch cracking against the animal's shoulder. Alex threw a rock, striking the predator's flank. The combined efforts of the group seemed to work. The mountain lion retreated a few steps, its growls rumbling like thunder. Claire barked orders, her voice steady despite her fear. "Stay together. Don't run." The group formed a tight circle, their backs to each other, facing the predator. The mountain lion paced, its tail twitching as it searched for an opening. It lunged once more, but this time, Claire jabbed at it with a trekking pole, grazing its muzzle. The animal yowled in pain and finally retreated, disappearing into the trees. The group didn't wait to see if it would return. Supporting Sam, who was pale and shaken but able to walk, they hurried down the trail, their heads on a swivel for any sign of the predator. Every rustling leaf and snapping twig sent their hearts racing, but they encountered no further danger. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the trailhead, where a lone hiker was preparing to set out. The group frantically explained what had happened, and the hiker called emergency services. Rangers arrived within the hour, administering first aid to Sam and escorting the group back to safety. The mountain lion was later tracked by wildlife officials and relocated to a more remote area of the forest. The incident sparked local debates about human encroachment on wildlife habitats and the need for increased awareness on hiking safety. For the hikers, the experience was life-changing. Sam's injuries required stitches but left no lasting damage, and he credited his sister and friends with saving his life. Claire, once a confident trekker, now approached the wilderness with a heightened sense of caution, always carrying bear spray and teaching others about predator encounters. Though they would never forget the terror of that day, the group found solace in their shared resilience. They returned to the trail a year later, this time better prepared and more aware of the fragile balance between humans and the untamed wild. In the summer of 1994, a group of friends embarked on a week-long camping trip in Washington's Cascade Mountains. The group consisted of 5 people: Aaron, the unofficial leader, and an experienced outdoorsman, his younger brother Daniel, a college sophomore eager for adventure, Rachel and Mia, childhood friends who shared a love of hiking, and David, a photographer documenting the trip for his nature portfolio. They had meticulously planned the trip, mapping out a route that would take them deep into the heart of the wilderness. The first few days were idyllic. The group traversed lush forests, crossed babbling brooks, and marveled at the snow-capped peaks in the distance. Aaron led them confidently, his well-worn map and compass in hand. At night, they gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and toasting marshmallows under a canopy of stars. Unbeknownst to them, their presence had not gone unnoticed. A massive grizzly bear, drawn by the scent of their food and the unfamiliar sounds, had begun tracking them. On the 4th day, the group reached a clearing by a tranquil lake. They decided to set up camp early to rest and enjoy the scenery. David ventured off to capture photos of the wildlife, while Rachel and Mia explored the shoreline. Aaron and Daniel stayed behind to pitch the tents and hang their food supplies high in a tree, a precaution Aaron insisted on, despite the others teasing him about being overly cautious. By dusk, the group reconvened for dinner, the aroma of their freeze-dried meals wafting into the cool evening air. As they laughed and planned the next day's hike, A rustling in the nearby bushes silenced them. Aaron stood, his hand instinctively reaching for the bear spray strapped to his belt. The rustling grew louder, and a low growl sent chills down their spines. From the shadows emerged the grizzly, its massive frame illuminated by the flickering firelight. The bear's dark eyes locked onto the group, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air. For a moment, no one moved. Then Aaron's voice broke the silence, firm but calm. "Don't run, stay together, make yourselves look big." The group huddled, their arms raised in a desperate attempt to appear larger. The bear took a step closer, its growl deepening. Aaron slowly reached for the bear spray, but before he could use it, the bear lunged, swiping at the food bag hanging in the tree. The impact sent the bag tumbling to the ground, spilling its contents. Seizing the opportunity, Aaron sprayed the bear, the orange mist hitting its face. The grizzly roared in anger, retreating momentarily but not fleeing. The group backed away, their breath shallow and rapid. "We need to move," Aaron said, his voice tense. Slowly, toward the lake. As they retreated, the bear charged again, this time knocking over a tent. The group scattered instinctively, their formation breaking. Daniel tripped over a root, landing hard on his back. The bear turned its attention to him, its massive paw swiping dangerously close. Rachel grabbed a fallen branch and shouted, waving it wildly to distract the predator. Her bravery worked. The bear shifted its focus to her, giving Aaron enough time to pull Daniel to his feet. "Head for the water!" Aaron yelled. The group sprinted toward the lake, the bear in pursuit. They waded into the icy water, stopping when it reached their waists. The grizzly paced the shoreline, growling and swiping at the air. It hesitated, unwilling to enter the water but equally unwilling to leave its quarry. For what felt like hours, the group remained in the lake, their bodies numb from the cold. The bear eventually wandered off, but Aaron cautioned against returning to shore too soon. "It could be waiting," he said, scanning the darkened forest. When they finally emerged, their camp was in ruins. Tents were shredded, supplies scattered, and the fire extinguished. Aaron assessed their situation grimly. "We've got to move. We'll head for the ranger station. It's about 10 miles north." The group gathered what they could, a few unscathed water bottles, a flashlight, and Aaron's map. They set off under the light of the moon, their pace brisk despite their exhaustion. The forest seemed more menacing now, every rustle and shadow a potential threat. A few hours into their trek, Mia stumbled and gasped. "It's here," she whispered. The others froze, hearing the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps behind them. The bear had returned, its hulking silhouette visible in the moonlight. Aaron handed the flashlight to Rachel and whispered, "Shine it in its eyes. Try to blind it." She did as instructed, the beam reflecting off the bear's retinas. The grizzly roared, momentarily disoriented. Aaron readied the last of the bear spray, but before he could use it, the bear charged. The group scattered again, but this time they stayed within sight of each other. Aaron aimed the spray, hitting the bear directly. It stopped, shaking its head and retreating into the woods. The group didn't wait to see if it would return. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs threatened to give out. As dawn broke, they reached the ranger station, a modest cabin nestled in a clearing. The rangers, alarmed by their disheveled appearance and frantic recounting of the attack, immediately called for backup. Medics treated Daniel's sprained ankle and the group's minor injuries, while wildlife officers set out to track the bear. The attack made headlines, a stark reminder of the dangers of the wilderness. The group's survival was credited to Aaron's quick thinking and their collective bravery. Though shaken, they all recovered, their bond strengthened by the ordeal. For Aaron, the experience reinforced the importance of preparation and respect for nature. He became an advocate for outdoor safety, sharing his story to educate others. The group never returned to the Cascade Trail, but their harrowing encounter remained a defining moment, a testament to their resilience in the face of nature's raw power. In the dense wilderness of Canada's Yukon Territory, a team of 6 researchers embarked on an expedition in the summer of 2015. Their goal was to document the biodiversity of the region, an area renowned for its untouched forests and thriving wildlife. The team included Dr. Alan Kearney, a seasoned biologist, Claire Hughes, a wildlife photographer, Jake Thompson, an ecologist, Sarah Miller, a graduate student, and Thomas and Emily Parker, siblings and field assistants. The journey began with optimism. The group's small convoy of off-road vehicles wound through gravel trails until the path gave way to a pristine valley bordered by towering evergreens. They set up camp on the edge of a crystal-clear lake, surrounded by a serene expanse of nature. The team spent their days collecting samples, recording observations, and capturing photographs of the region's diverse flora and fauna. By the 4th day, the group had ventured deeper into the forest, following faint animal trails that wove between ancient trees. Signs of wildlife were everywhere, fresh tracks pressed into the soft earth, claw marks on tree trunks, and the occasional distant howl or rustle. Despite the sense of isolation, they remained alert to the risks of venturing into bear territory. Late in the afternoon, while cataloging plant species in a dense grove, Claire noticed an unusual silence. The birds that had filled the air with their songs earlier had gone quiet, and even the rustling of leaves seemed subdued. The team exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that something was amiss. They continued their work, but a growing unease settled over them. As they made their way back toward camp, they encountered the first sign of danger. A mangled carcass of a deer, its fresh wound suggesting it had fallen victim to a large predator. Dr. Kearney inspected the scene and confirmed their fears. This was the work of a grizzly bear, likely still in the area. The group decided to quicken their pace, the weight of their equipment slowing their progress as the daylight began to fade. When they were less than a mile from camp, a low guttural growl stopped them in their tracks. The group froze as the massive form of a grizzly emerged from the underbrush. The bear's shaggy coat glistened in the dim light, and its small, dark eyes locked onto the team. It stood on its hind legs, towering over them, its sheer size a horrifying testament to its power. The bear dropped to all fours and began advancing, its movements deliberate and measured. The researchers slowly backed away, careful not to provoke it further. The bear's growls grew louder, and in an instant, it charged. The team scattered instinctively, their training abandoned in the face of raw terror. Thomas, weighed down by his pack, stumbled and fell. The bear pounced, swiping at him with its massive paw. His scream cut through the forest, but his sister Emily, despite her fear, grabbed a fallen branch and swung it at the bear. The grizzly hesitated, distracted by the sudden movement, allowing Thomas to crawl away. Blood soaked his shirt from a deep gash on his back, but he was alive. The bear, now agitated, turned its attention to the others. Claire climbed a nearby tree, her camera swinging wildly around her neck. Dr. Kearney and Jake retreated into a thicket, while Sarah froze in place, paralyzed by fear. The bear roared and charged at Sarah, who managed to dive behind a fallen log just in time. Its claws raked the wood, splinters flying as it tried to reach her. Jake emerged from the thicket with a flare gun in hand, a last resort piece of equipment they carried for emergencies. He fired it into the air, the bright light and loud crack startling the bear. The animal reared back, snarling before retreating into the shadows. The group remained motionless, listening intently for any signs of its return. When they were certain the bear had gone, they regrouped. Thomas's injury was severe, and he was losing blood quickly. Emily and Dr. Kearney fashioned a makeshift stretcher from branches in their jackets, while Claire and Jake kept watch. They moved as quickly as they could, every snapped twig or rustling bush sending waves of panic through the group. By the time they reached camp, darkness had fully descended. They treated Thomas's wounds with their limited medical supplies and radioed for emergency assistance. The signal was weak, but they managed to convey their location and the urgency of the situation. Hours passed as they huddled together, weapons and flare guns at the ready, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the bear. The rescue team arrived at dawn, their vehicles cutting through the mist with piercing headlights. Medics stabilized Thomas and prepared him for transport, while wildlife officers took detailed accounts of the attack. The officers later tracked the bear, which they determined had likely been defending its kill, and saw the researchers as a threat. It was tranquilized and relocated to a more remote area, far from human activity. The expedition ended abruptly, the group returning home shaken but grateful to be alive. Thomas required surgery and months of rehabilitation but made a full recovery. Emily, who had faced the bear to save her brother, became a local hero, though she dismissed the label, saying she had acted out of instinct. For Dr. Kearney and the others, the encounter underscored the raw power of nature and the importance of respecting its boundaries. Their research was completed, using the data they had gathered, but the experience left an indelible mark on all of them. Each member of the team carried the memory of that harrowing night in the Yukon, a sobering reminder of the fine line between human exploration and nature's untamed wilds. In the autumn of 1937, a small group of travelers found themselves seeking refuge at a remote hunting lodge deep in the Appalachian wilderness. The lodge, an old timber structure built decades prior, sat at the edge of a sprawling forest, surrounded by rugged hills and shadowy glens. Among the group were James Hadley, an experienced outdoorsman; Eleanor Foster, a schoolteacher looking for solitude; Peter and Margaret Caldwell, a couple celebrating their anniversary; and a traveling salesman named Walter Finch, whose car had broken down on the nearby dirt road. The lodge caretaker, Amos Griggs, was a grizzled man with decades of mountain living behind him. He welcomed the group, offering warm meals and the comfort of a crackling fire. The air was crisp, the leaves a riot of orange and red, and the faint call of owls echoed through the night. Yet, an unspoken tension lingered. Locals had whispered about a massive black bear seen prowling the area, its unusual boldness raising concerns. Amos dismissed the rumors, claiming the wilderness always held dangers, but his tone betrayed a hint of unease. The first night passed uneventfully, the travelers lulled to sleep by the lodge's rustic charm and the rhythmic sounds of the forest. By dawn, James and Peter ventured into the woods for a morning hunt while the others stayed behind. The men returned hours later with a small game, recounting their trek through dense underbrush and steep ravines. But their tone turned somber when James revealed they'd found fresh claw marks gouged into a tree near the trail, deep marks that could only belong to a large bear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the group gathered in the main room, the flickering firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees and carrying the faint scent of decay. Amos noticed it first, the faint but distinct smell of a predator. His expression hardened as he walked to the window, peering into the darkness. The others followed his gaze, but saw only the vague outline of trees swaying in the wind. That night, the bear made its presence known. A heavy thud against the lodge's back wall jolted the group from their sleep. Amos grabbed his rifle, motioning for everyone to stay upstairs while he checked the commotion. James, unwilling to let the older man face danger alone, followed cautiously. Outside, the moon cast a pale glow over the yard, and there it was, a hulking black bear, its fur matted and its eyes gleaming. It stood on its hind legs, pawing at the window shutters, its massive form dwarfing the small porch. Amos fired a warning shot into the air, the sharp crack echoing through the valley. The bear dropped to all fours, retreating into the shadows, but not far. Its growls reverberated through the night, as if daring them to come closer. The two men secured the windows and doors before returning to the others. their expressions grim. The bear was bold, too bold, and it wouldn't leave easily. By morning, the yard was a scene of destruction. The bear had ransacked the storage shed, scattering tools and tearing into food supplies. Deep claw marks scarred the lodge's outer walls, and tracks led back into the forest. The group debated leaving, but the nearest town was miles away, and the bear's behavior suggested it wouldn't let them go without incident. That afternoon, James and Amos set out to reinforce the lodge's defenses. They boarded up windows, secured the doors with heavy beams, and fashioned makeshift barricades. Meanwhile, Eleanor and Margaret tended to the supplies, rationing what little food remained. Walter paced nervously, the weight of isolation and impending danger pressing down on him. As dusk fell, the atmosphere grew heavier. The wind howled and the forest seemed to close in around them. The group huddled together in the main room, the fire their only source of warmth and light. Hours passed in tense silence until a low growl broke the stillness. The bear had returned, its massive silhouette visible just beyond the tree line. The attack came swiftly. The bear charged the front door, its immense weight splintering the wood. Chaos erupted as Amos fired his rifle, the deafening blasts doing little to deter the predator. James grabbed a hunting knife, slashing at the bear's side as it lunged into the room. Walter stumbled backward, knocking over a table, while Eleanor and Margaret retreated to the stairs. Amos's second shot struck the bear in the shoulder, causing it to rear back and swipe at him with its claws. The force sent him crashing into the wall, his rifle skidding across the floor. James threw himself between the bear and the others, his knife flashing in the firelight. He landed a deep blow to the bear's flank, but it roared in fury, swiping him to the ground. The bear turned its attention to Walter, who had cornered himself near the hearth. Desperation overtook him as he grabbed a burning log and thrust it at the animal. The flames startled the bear, forcing it to retreat momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Margaret and Eleanor pulled James to safety, his arm badly injured but intact. Amos, regaining his footing, retrieved his rifle and fired again. This time, the shot hit its mark, and the bear let out a pained roar before retreating through the shattered door and into the night. The group collapsed in exhaustion, the room littered with broken furniture and the scent of blood and smoke hanging heavy in the air. By morning, the forest was eerily silent. Tracks near the lodge indicated the bear had staggered away, its blood trail disappearing into the underbrush. Amos insisted it wouldn't survive long with its injuries, but cautioned the group to remain vigilant. They spent the day repairing what they could and tending to their wounds, their movements slow and deliberate as the reality of their survival set in. A search party arrived 2 days later, alerted by Walter's delayed return to town. The group recounted their ordeal, their faces pale but resolute. The bear's body was later found several miles from the lodge, its massive frame a testament to the danger they had faced. The attack left scars both physical and emotional, but the travelers' bond deepened in the aftermath. James recovered from his injuries, though the memory of the bear's roar haunted him for years. Eleanor returned to her classroom, her perspective on life forever altered. Walter, once consumed by his work, sought a quieter existence, cherishing each moment as a gift. The lodge remained, its walls bearing the marks of the attack as a reminder of nature's raw power. For those who survived, the encounter became a story of resilience and the fragile balance between humanity and the wilderness.